Hi everyone, Megan here from Romance by the Book with the lovely Marielle.
Hello.
And this month, our book of the month author is Grace Callaway. We read Fiona and the Enigmatic Earl for our June book, and it was so much fun. We loved it. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
No, it's been kind of a long time coming because I am a long time Grace Callaway reader, and I think I met you at RWA maybe one year.
It was New York, right?
Yes.
New York? Yeah.
Yes, it was. Yeah. And then all these things happened. And
so many things.
But Megan, this is your first Grace Callaway book.
And I loved it. I loved it so much. I can't wait to go back and read the first two. I'm excited.
Oh, yay. Yeah. The series has been like super fun to write. So it's been my little escape during the last couple of years.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, I guess that's actually a good segue for my first question, which was just like, what gave you the idea to write like a Charlie's Angels vibe into a historical and have like lady detectives? It's super fun.
I think because like all of that is my catnip. I grew up in the 80s, so I watched like all of Charlie's Angels, and I totally wanted to be Kelly for really shallow reasons. I just thought Catherine Smith was so gorgeous.
She was, though.
I remember I was like, oh my God, I want to be her. And I've actually, even though historical is my first love, I've always kind of written a lot of mystery into the plot. It's just kind of like, that's the kind of book I like to read. So that's what I write. So I was like, just kind of thinking about, because I'd done the detective agency with the Kent family, another series. And I was like, okay, so now I'm in like 1848. What can I do that has like a nice, like that I could do a lot of mysteries in the stories? And then I realized that I had all these girls, women of a certain age, and they were all friends. I'd written them as friends in a previous book. So that's one thing if you're new to my books. It might be a little, there's a lot of characters. They're all written as standalones, the books, but all the characters have other stories.
Yeah.
Just the way this brain works for whatever reason.
You have a whole multiverse like Marvel.
I do. Oh my God. Like, it's just, I love stuff like that, like Avengers. I mean, I'm all about the multiverse and the like interweaving storylines. So I had these girls of a certain age, they're all second generation characters. And I was like, you know what I think they really want to do is they want to go out and be part of this secret lady detective agency.
And I was going to ask you about that and just like what, if there were things that you liked or if there were any challenges to writing that second generation, because for me as a reader, it's super fun to go back in and be like, I know your parents, or like or the parents trying to be like, you need to be careful, and I'm like,
you're like, I know about you.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there are lots of challenges. I mean, in the sense that one thing that and this is like, in the evolution of every story is like making sure that I'm in the point of view of the characters. It's really about their story. And for me, that's very important. So when you're second generation, like, a lot of the cast, and, you can't let them take over. Because I feel very at home writing their point of view, right? So it's like everything has to be from the point of view. I write from the hero and heroine. So in this case, like Fiona and Hawk's point of view. But, the other characters, because I'd been in their heads so much, I had to be really careful.
So not whispering in your ear, like.
Especially, like some characters just speak very loudly to you. So like, Adam Garrity has always been one of these characters that could like really take over like in my head. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'm writing him. He's the dad. He is the dad in this story, not,
it's not his story. But actually, he is a character that even in your first series, when he popped up, it was immediately like, who's that?
Right.
Because he has a very, like, his personality was really interesting and like kind of mysterious. He was like mean, but then maybe not so mean.
Yeah, he was kind of a villain in the first series, and then
He was
slight
100% villain in the
first,
series.
and
I
then
was like, wow. And then, and then
yeah,
he got married, and I was like, what happened?
I know he got married in the second series, and then you had a story in the third series.
Yeah.
So
So the
that's
second
yeah.
series, like all of oh gosh, why can't I think of names? I can't think of her name, but all of her friends were so worried about her because they were like,
Oh, Gabby. Yeah.
is Mr.
Yeah.
Garrity treating you okay? Because he was like, everyone knew he was not, but she
Shady.
was, pardon?
He was shady
He
for
was
sure.
real shady, yeah. And Gabby was like, he's ever so nice. I was like, what?
You're like, clearly we don't know all we need to know about him.
No, I was very excited when their story came out. I was like, give it to me.
That's
It
funny.
was a really fun run. That was actually one of the rare gift books. I don't get a lot of gift books. Most of them are like horrendously difficult to write. But that one actually came very naturally to me. I think because he had been in my head for like, I don't know, 15 books or something before then, I was like, oh yes, I know what's going on with them. So
Right.
regarding the
Yeah.
duplicate, an easy
That
one
makes
to write.
sense.
I don't think it was like necessary to have read that book to understand, or to understand where Fiona was coming from. But it was really interesting, as someone who had read your backlist, to read Fiona's like perspective on
Mhm.
like, how she was her dad's favorite, and then at some point she started feeling like a disappointment to him, and how that affected her, which I think is interesting in a whole different way that probably has nothing to do with the romance novel. But I'm like, these parents trying to like do their best and make sure that their kids like grow up to be good people, and then their kids like, their kid internalizes it a completely different
Yeah.
way than what was the intention.
Yeah, and I think that I love writing family relationships. Like I love that. That's actually, I think, how I ended up writing, the second generation. It's like even happy families, right? Even these hero and heroines who have happy endings. I mean, there's still stuff that happens in the family, right? Like
Yeah.
you were saying with the kids, Adam's trying to protect her and guide her, but she internalizes a totally different reason for it. And she overhears little things about, how he's saying like she's too wild or too headstrong. Really, he's afraid that she's too much like him.
Yeah.
Right. And he doesn't want her making the same mistakes. Yeah, that relationship felt pretty familiar for me to write that. So yeah, so that it is really fun, but there are challenges definitely with writing second generation.
And it's cool to keep them still like very true, because I felt like even Helena and I can't remember anybody's name, the Marquis, but they were also very like true to their like former selves, even though they were older, and like they were still there, which is really cool as a reader, but I'm assuming would be hard as the writer to like make sure you remember them and put them on the page, older but still the same person.
I mean, that is a challenge. I mean, you have to remember kind of their relationship dynamics, how they bantered with each other, how their personalities might have changed. I mean, not changed, but how would it affect the kind of parents they would be. Yeah, I spent a lot of time actually thinking about all the family dynamics and the generational things that are transmitted. But, I'm a psychologist, so this is my jam.
That's awesome. And so was your research any different for writing more of like a detective type story and then like a spy as a hero versus like when you do your typical historical research?
I always write some kind of like outlandish mystery in my books.
Okay.
I mean, that's the kind of thing, like I feel, so it's kind of a weird thing. Like when people ask me like, what do I write? It's a little bit hard to categorize myself. I mean, clearly I'm identified very much as a historical romance writer, and that's probably where my home is, but it's not like straight up historical romance either. So it's sort of, because it's super steamy on the one hand, so people kind of resonate with that. But then there's also like this big mystery thing, thread. So I was talking with an author friend about it, and she was like, actually, what you write is like erotic, historical, romantic suspense and mystery. And I was like, okay, that's going to be my tagline.
A lot of words for description. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is sort of like a mix of all of the things. So to answer your question, I mean, I do a lot of background historical research, and not all of it, I think, is like super evident necessarily in the book. But it's so that I get a feel of the setting. Like I read a lot about chartism, for example. I read a lot about like Babbage and his like crazy computer and the different iterations of it. And actually, they actually made a version of his machine that's not far from where I am. And I tried to go see it, but it was closed down because of the pandemic.
Oh no.
But they actually have like a replica, and it's like, but you can watch it on YouTube, and it is like a huge like thing. And so I spent a lot of time going down like those kinds of research holes, rabbit holes, because they're super interesting to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do a lot of historical research, and I think the mystery part of it is just kind of a separate thing.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. I also was curious a bit about that, because I think every book I've read from you has some kind of suspenseful, well, I don't know if suspense is right, but like thriller-ish. There's always something that's like a mystery or like a secret that becomes dangerous at some point. And you'll have like some big thing that happens during the course of the story. And I was curious if that's usually something like that you have, like, do you know a lot about like gunpowder and things that are flammable? And because I feel
like flour.
Oh my God, my friend, she's like, you're like, are you Googling all these things?
Is something gonna come for you?
Yeah, like my search history is a little terrifying, I have to admit. So like I'm always adding like explosive devices for a novel, just to make sure no one's, in case anyone cares what Grace Callaway is searching.
Like if there's ever a fire or some kind of explosion at your house, it's gonna be like, look at all the books she wrote.
It's gonna be bad, right? I have a very curious mind. I just like want to know. So actually the Duke Identity, which is the book, they did a lot of research on like gunpowder and nitrocellulose. Oh my God. I had so much fun. Like, so it's weird because sometimes, and it's a fair criticism, people say my books are not strictly historical. And I'm like, okay, fair enough.
I wasn't too worried about that though.
Yeah, I mean, that's not what I'm trying to do, is to write like the, Jane Austen type novel, which is wonderful. Love that too. But, I'm doing a different thing.
Yeah.
But I do actually spend a lot of time on research. I just like am less interested about, although I also do a lot of research on clothing, but that's less interesting to me in general than like gunpowder. Like different kinds of poisons. So awesome. That is the Agatha Christie interest that I have. I read a lot of Agatha Christie as a kid.
I can see that. It's so much fun though. And having that, like, even in this story, one of the things that I think struck us both was how like honest they were with each other about some things, even though they were keeping these secrets that put them at odds with each other, but also like if they had talked, maybe they could have seen that their investigations were kind of similar. Maybe
Overlapping.
they could have
Yeah.
helped each other. So it was kind of fun to see that them trying to like be vulnerable, but then keep these secrets that that led to like big issues. I mean, in like in the outside world issues later.
Mhm.
It's fun. And I feel like you have that though. One of my favorite books of yours is the and now I can't remember, the lady who came in from the cold, maybe.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And that book was really cool too, because it was like they had been married for years, but she had been a spy in the war, and he was like a decorated
Yeah. He's a
person,
war hero. Yeah.
and he didn't realize that he had met her during the war.
Yeah.
And also like she was, as part of like her benefits, I guess, of having been a spy, they like presented her as like a lady. And so he married her thinking that she was like this like pure lily white
Proper lady.
person from the, and meanwhile she wasn't. And when he found out, he like flipped out. But it's like, I love the way your series are, because he finds out, like, we know everything leading up to him finding out, but he finds out and like loses his mind. And she is trying to be very reasonable, but then at some point she like kidnaps him and is like, look, we have to talk. And I was just like, wow, there's always like a thing that completely gets me. And in this one, I feel like when she was doing her investigation and ends up in that like sex garden or whatever it was called, and then he's there, I was like, oh no, like, how are you gonna explain this? Do these things happen organically, or do you like plot them out and like make them happen? Because I'm always endlessly amused but don't understand.
It's a combination. I think my process is I'm somewhere between, I'm not a pantser, but I also don't follow my own plots all that well. So, I'm somewhere in between, where I have a general idea, and it's different for every book.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes like what sparks an interest in writing a book is like a premise, just like an idea, right? Like, oh, what happens if, for the lady who came in from the cold, is like, she has had this secret this whole time, and they're married, and they're super happily married with 3 kids, and then the secret comes out, right? So for that book, it was really just kind of that premise that grabbed me. For other things, it's like, it's a character that I'm interested in exploring, or it's some funny thing about gunpowder. Like it's whatever it is for the book that grabs me. And so I generally will try to kind of outline a little bit, just like my main turning points, but like literally it never happens that way. Ever. It's a result of a lot of revision, frankly, to kind of get things where they need to be. So yeah, it's kind of messy.
That actually leads perfectly into my next question, which is about Hawk and Fee's meet cute, which was so awesome in this book. And I was curious if you always knew that's how they would start, or if that kind of popped up later for you.
That actually did not show up until my second draft.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Like I knew, I hadn't, like, I kind of knew that they were going to meet in disguise, but I hadn't quite figured out like how much they would know from that meeting. And then so sometimes I do a disgusting number of drafts also. It's part of the messy process, so yeah. Sometimes I have to kind of write through the book to know what I need to start in the beginning. So yeah, the first half of most of my books are rewritten many
Interesting.
times.
That was a really fun start though.
It was.
But yeah, when I actually wrote it, it came out pretty organically the way it is. Because I had figured out the characters and kind of how much they needed to know, like just enough so that she could, later on suspect,
Mhm.
Right.
his secret identity, but not enough to give them away, right? Because they still had to have this sort of fun spy versus spy thing going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. It's also kind of fun because I feel like we are meet cute to his parents in that very first. That was the first book I read from you because it was like I think it was free on Apple Books.
That was
And
my
Your first
debut.
book?
Yeah, that was my very first book. Yeah.
And they also like are in disguise when they first see each other in that first scene in that book, even though they already know each other, they just don't know that.
So that was deliberate. And I even echoed certain things some dialogue.
Like a French accent? Because I was like, what?
No, totally. So this is one of the things
That's
that
so
I
fun.
love as like an Avenger fan and fans of like multiverses and stuff. I love Easter eggs. I love them.
I was
So-
enjoying them too.
So I love putting that in. So it's like I write my books so they're standalone, so someone could pick it up who has never read me at all and be like, oh, okay, I can read the story and get everything that's going on. But if you have read my books, there's like little extra things to find.
Yay.
Yeah, because it's fun. It's fun for me.
It was a lot of fun to read. I was like,
sure.
what?
Yeah.
When I saw his parents, I was like, what?
You were like, oh, the French accent. I get it now.
Yep.
That's awesome.
In that first book, I could like hear her in my head trying to be like, I am French. Yes, I am.
Yes, of course, I'm French.
That was a pretty crazy book.
Pardon?
That was a pretty crazy book.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was also very
But
organic,
that's way.
Yeah. Well, your first books, you get to write with such freedom. There's no expectation, there's nothing before it. You just get to like
Yeah.
Put it all out there.
put it all out there. It was fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think the first one and then the second one, which was like a Hades and Persephone book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. See, that's what happened. I read that first book and then I went back now and then I was like, well, I'm going to read the rest of this. And then I was hooked forever. So
So well done.
yeah, I was like, whatever special sauce you're sticking in there.
Yeah, we did actually talk about that some in our recap videos. I think the first one, especially, Marielle kind of talked about like, when you kind of see callbacks to like stuff from your prior books and stuff like that. So that was fun for me to find out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't think it's necessary to enjoy the book at all, but I was absolutely tickled getting to go in there and see people that I recognized and things that I was like, hey, who they had their little like council of, and I was like, I feel like I know who this person is, and I wonder if this person's going to show up later.
Right. Is
Very
this
fun.
person the kid of another character that I remember from another book? Yeah.
Mhm.
Like, didn't you say Devlin? You think you
I
recognize
think
him?
I think he's related to somebody who likes banking people. Let me see. I'm gonna pull up my books. Sorry. Now you're getting to see too much how my brain works.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think he was in that second series. Or third. No, because the second series was the Kents. So I think it was that he was like a mysterious blonde. He had a son that had seizures, maybe.
Oh, was he? One sec. That's Emma's from our class?
Yeah. I'm trying to think if that's the name. I don't remember any names, but I remember all
Oh,
the
that's okay. I'm terrible
details. So Emma's from Marquess. I was thinking that his kid might have been in that war council. Devlin wasn't Devlin. Anyway, you don't have to tell us all the secrets. I definitely was in there looking for people, and then someone was like, "I work for the water taxis," and I was like, I remember that from Trent. Had some friends that used to work there. Like I definitely had theories and things where I was like, I better go back and see if this name's matched. Anyway,
I
obsessive
love that.
reading. Yes. But it was really fun too to see like the differences between someone working like for a charity versus someone who's working for the government. And I was curious if that was a thing that you always wanted them to have, like interests that were the same but different. Because they both felt like they couldn't tell each other, but it was like the same thing. I'm like, if you just talked though, you would be able to talk about it. You just don't know.
I mean, I actually felt like they had a lot more in common than you would think, right? Like on the outside, their personalities are kind of different, but they were on the inside, they were very similar.
Yeah.
Like they're both very driven, ambitious, like they wanted to do their own thing, kind of like headstrong, intelligent. So yeah, I thought they were actually a lot of
well
fun.
matched.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's like opposites attract, but they're actually just opposites on the surface. But I think personalities are actually fairly similar.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that he definitely like enjoyed, like both of them enjoyed helping people, but enjoyed the like both the secrecy,
the intrigue
and, like,
of
the
it,
action, and the uncovering puzzles and secrets and being smart.
Yeah, they both like being smart, and they're both turned on by other people who are smart, like both of them, right?
Well, how convenient that they're both very smart.
right? Well, and I like too, because in the meet cute, you know, they're both attracted to how competent the other one is. And then later, you know, when one or both of them doesn't know that that's who they are, they, you know, have misgivings about the competency of the other person in some areas. But of course, you know, that all, you know, comes out later. But I thought that was really fun that they got to see that in each other without knowing who the other person was. And so then it took a longer time for them to see it in each other in real life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was a lot of fun too. Just the fact that and I guess maybe your psychology background helps with that too, to have like characters who can seem one way on the surface, but then are not really that way on the inside. Even for I felt like for Fiona, like she was much less confident than what she appeared on the outside. And I thought it was really sweet when she like she talked to Hawk about it, but then she also talked to her friends about it, and how they were like, oh goodness, like we teased you about this stuff, and we wouldn't have if we knew that you were sensitive, like, you know, that was like a sore spot for you. Which I thought like how sweet and how nice to like have a friend group that you can be vulnerable with, and like have that sort of be on the page where somebody can like look one way and you don't really know that actually they're not as confident as you might think, or they're not like as strong in the way that you think they are.
I think this is actually why I love writing romance and why I love reading romance, is I want stories that are like optimistic, you know, and full of hope. And in my books, I write the world as I kind of would like it to be, you know, where there really is acceptance with your friends, but also showing, I mean, the struggle. I think Fiona's struggle is pretty common. I mean, I've experienced it. You know, there's books written about it, you know, now that, you know, how people look on the outside can be very different from how we feel. Especially for her, you know, the imposter syndrome and all of that, pretty common in, well, women and men now, they're really seeing.
That just because you have the like trappings of success or popularity or whatever doesn't mean that you feel
like
that
you
way
deserve
on the
it.
inside.
Or
Yeah, that on the inside you could feel like you don't deserve it, or like you were just lucky to like, have something that was not anything that you did. It's very easy, I think, to externalize success or compliments or whatever it is.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and with Fiona too, like the things that came easiest to her that felt like her personality, or like just kind of who she was, the markers of herself, were things that her dad was trying to like, okay,
Right.
like tone down.
you can tone that down now, it's okay. And so I think for her it was like surprising to meet somebody who really enjoyed those things about her. It was really like, I thought it was very sweet to see that, she was like, well, I guess if I get married, I'm gonna have to be this way and that way. But then she talks to him and is like, hey, I want to get married. It needs to be for convenience. And this is, it's got to be like this. And he's just like, oh,
Great.
perfect.
Right on.
Amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because it's written in the context, as we're talking about this, of like, they each have these spy secrets they want to keep. But really, it's a reflection of relationships in general and like fear of intimacy in general, right? I think for a lot of us, it's like, you want to be close to someone, you want to have acceptance, but at the same time, you want to kind of hold back like the things that you feel like, might not be acceptable, or we could be judged for, or the things that feel like scary and vulnerable to share.
Yeah.
So it's like on one level, it's about them wanting to keep their spy secrets, but on another, it's about them wanting to keep their emotional, their safety nets.
Yeah. I feel like for Hawk especially too, because all that stuff with his wife, it was like he got into a relationship that turned out to be different than what he expected and maybe hoped for. And then he seemed very ashamed of, some of how that turned out, and like his ability to support his wife, I guess. So I thought it was interesting the way you dealt with that too, because he was such a grown-up about it. In the parts where he like kind of felt himself kind of freaking out over Fiona, like being extra quiet or doing, and he was like, oh no, this is how it starts. She has a headache. Uh-oh, this is the beginning of the end. And he had to
trying
like
to
talk
not
himself
like
back.
fully spiral down about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I feel like in an old school romance, like that would have happened, but he would have like left the country for 3 years, and she would have, like he would have become a pirate and then come back 3 years later. And
they would have had a secret baby in the meantime too.
Yeah.
That was like scarred by this like total absence.
Yeah.
I love those old school books. Yeah.
He would have been like, you weren't pregnant, and she was like, yes, I am now. That sounds like a Joanna Lindsay book, but anyway. But he was like modern enough, I guess, to be able to be like, wait a minute, different person, this is okay, we can deal with this, I can just ask her, that's fine. And I thought like, yay, good, way to go, Hawk.
Yeah. And I loved that whole like after the fight, like where she like or after the, like not the fight, but after, when she says like, oh, I need to be alone, it's because she's crying, and she's like, you said you didn't like emotional outbursts, and clearly I'm having one, so like leave me alone. And he's like, wait, no, I think it's okay. And she's like, are you sure? Like, I was trying to like spare you, but like if you insist on coming in here, then you're gonna get cried on. That's just what's happening right now. And it was so real.
That was the fun part, to write their personalities, because that's the part where they are a little different. She's more of the like outgoing and he's kind of more quiet. It's kind of fun to pair I don't know what that trope is called, but it's not quite, is that Grumpy Sunshine? I don't know.
Yeah, I think they were a little bit, because he was probably more like quiet than he was grumpy, but I think that still fits.
He like veered to the grumpy, even though he wasn't 100% grumpy all the time.
Yeah.
He didn't grunt enough to be a grumpy sunshine, but yeah, it was fun.
So fun.
I also really kind of liked when her friends were trying to like help her out, and she was like, I don't need any help, it's fine, because like she didn't go on her honeymoon, and they're like,
Oh, right. Pippa was like, so, I mean, do you want to talk about anything? Like, sometimes it's not great the first time or whatever. She's like, no, I'm good. She's like, oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
was
writing
really
the
funny.
girls, like the female friendships are a big part of this series. I have so much fun like writing their dynamics within the group and like their little rituals and like all of that. That is really, really fun for me.
well, and when like it is kind of gearing up to like have like the husbands being like their own little like clan, since the girls are so close and so adventurous, like that would be, I feel like, a very singular kind of relationship to be in. So I thought it was kind of funny that the husbands are like, okay, we get a band together too.
Yeah,
It's
that
not
was fun.
It's not easy being the husband of an angel, right?
Yeah.
Right. Especially when the angel means that they're out there trying to do all this stuff.
All this dangerous stuff.
I know. Well, I think it's funny that he didn't like, I mean, he did, but when she was like in the alley and in the, and he's just like, oh, I mean, surely it was just a one time, like, I don't even know if I remember that right. It was probably fine. Like, he tried real hard to like not make a thing of it, and then then he's like, wait a minute.
We can rationalize a lot of things to ourselves, right?
Yes, this is true.
Yes.
I'm good at that too. Like, it's good for the world. It's good for the world if I do this. Meanwhile, I just want to do it. It's fine.
So we have questions we always ask authors when we have them on, and mine is, what is your favorite trope to read?
It's really funny. It's like it took me a while to understand like what a trope was. I don't actually, it's a very popular thing now, right? In the book community to be like, oh, give me a book with this trope. I literally don't actually start writing my books thinking of any tropes. It's only afterwards, after I've written the book, that I have to like, then I think, oh, I should like market this as a certain trope, because that's what people now talk about books as, like what trope is it? But like, so there are certain books that I've always loved that like, I love marriage stories. It's like a thing with me. I just, there's something about, a relationship, especially in historical, because pretty much like, when you're married, you're like stuck for life, unless you're one of, 4 people or whatever who could get a divorce after a certain, So yeah, I love marriage stories because I just feel like they're so like intense, and there's like a lot of room for like angst and development, and you're like in this like situation. So my first book was a marriage book. This book was a marriage book. The Lady Who Came from the Cold. Also, actually, regarding the Duke. Also, so I have to allow myself only to write like one marriage book per series or something. But I love reading. Like if I see a book that's like, oh, Marriage in Jeopardy, or like something, I'm like, or second chances sometimes fall under this category. So I also love that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've always liked Marriage in Trouble, but I do like second chance story. I feel like I've always liked second chance stories. And maybe now that I'm like married and older, maybe it feels like those marriage stories are like, I enjoy them, but also they're so complicated, and sometimes like I think Eloisa James also writes marriage stories, and she'll write people who are like, we got married, we didn't know each other, and I went to Greece to like study statues.
just read that
And
one.
then it came back like 10 years later, and the lady's like, yeah, I have a boyfriend that I want to marry, so we should get divorced. It's really, it's interesting to see like all the different ways that you can write marriage, especially in historicals, where like people can absolutely not know each other at all and get married, or they can be married for a long time and be having issues, or something can happen. I don't know. I feel like because your first book was a marriage, but it was like people who they knew each other like superficially, but
they
they
kind of
both,
didn't. Yeah.
yeah, and they both felt like the other, like they weren't what the other wanted or needed, or they weren't good enough. Maybe I know that like the husband in that one felt like he wasn't good enough,
Right.
and then the wife was like, I don't know, I'm not the prettiest girl in the ball. And it was, which was sad, but also put her in some interesting situations. Her friend was like, you should go check this stuff out. Like she was like very adventurous to like try stuff, because she was like, she was gonna figure this out. And so I think it's always fun to read people who are like gonna do what it takes. And in your stories, they seem to like take that all the way to the maximum. I think you also write lots of like curious heroines too, like people who are very, because I think with the Kent sisters, and a lot of them, like the brother, they were like a detective agency, and the sisters were like, well, I can be a detective too. And it's kind of fun with them getting in trouble because they're just like nosy.
I think that's probably one most of my heroines have in common. They're pretty in their own way. Like even if they seem like a wallflower on the outside, they're fairly determined.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they kind of, once they know what they want, they pretty much go after it.
Yeah.
I don't know why, they just come out that way.
It must be your favorite way to write. The ladies. I feel like, what book did you the fourth book in your first series, which I'm not gonna remember the name of. Look it up.
Oh, her Prodigal Passion. Is that with Charity and Paul?
Yes. Yeah, because they weren't like, they got married like, I don't know, maybe through the first act, but that heroine like seemed like she was not going to be as
Yes.
and then she was. Then she was like,
and then there was this moment where she was just like, yep. Yeah,
it's really fun though. Do you think, because I feel like I've heard maybe Sarah McLean talk about like your, like people having a core story that they write, or like a kind of like that there's like a core to their books that is like a similar theme maybe that they explore. Is that something that you feel happens in your books, or do you generally just like write the premise? I know you talked about how like some things will like tickle your interest and you go down that rabbit hole, but when you end at the end, do you find that you're writing similar kinds of
themes? I think the core story is not necessarily something you plan, right? Like that's just something that comes out kind of like as you write a number of books. Mm-hmm. But I think the core story in almost in all of my books is about people finding acceptance and sometimes healing through love, right? That at the end of the day is like when you show who you really are with all your flaws and all your quirks and everything, even especially the stuff that you're most scared to show, right? That's when and that person, accepts you for who you are and vice versa. I mean, that's true love, right? So I think actually that's a journey in every single one of my books that I pretty much do my hero and my heroine.
Yeah.
For all of them. And I think to me, that's an important thing. Again, that's why we read romance, is like, I want that hope and redemption and like, happy endings for people.
Yeah. I do think in your books that like they only really get their happy ending once they like reveal themselves completely. Like they have to be themselves to the fullest extent before they can actually be loved, which is not a bad lesson to learn, I will say.
I do put some of them through the grinder with the dark moment, the emotional dark moment. But I feel like it's funny because you were asking about tropes that like I like to read. And I know I was in a group and a reader group doing a presentation, and people were like, tell me what tropes they like. And I would tell them back what book from my catalog has that trope. And one very popular trope that came up was insta love.
Mm-hmm.
And I was literally stumped because I was like, I think I've ever written, like, I think I don't understand what insta love is. Like me personally, as a reader, I'm not, and I'm sure there's like excellent insta love books out there. But for me as a writer, I'm like, what? I don't actually understand. Like, I understand insta lust and insta attraction. I have plenty of that in my books. But I was like, what is insta love? Like, I actually don't quite understand it.
Like it does not compute.
Like for me, and I think that kind of goes back to like my stories of like I feel like people go through a number of stages and it's not like a linear progression, right? It's a lot of back and forth in a relationship as you kind of like, you fight, you have these peak moments, like all of this is part of getting to know one another, right? In all aspects of who we are. And to me, that's love. So yeah, I don't think I've ever written insta love.
Interesting.
Yeah, I need to find like, do you guys know like what's a good insta love book?
Megan might know this better.
You ask me for a book and then I can't think of a book. That's like how that always works for me. So
No,
I'm like, I have a billion books in my head and
now.
they're like this book and I'm like, whoop, they're gone.
But no, like when people say insta love, like do they literally like it means like you instantly fall in love with someone?
Yeah. I feel like
I don't know if I've ever read an insta love historical per se. Now that I think about it, I feel like insta love is almost, or at least maybe started almost as more like a paranormal type of thing, like a fated mates sort of situation.
Okay,
and that sort of expanded out from that.
I love fated mates, but to me, even that is not exactly, my favorite fated mate books are like, we're fated to be together, but we hate each other so much right now, right? And we're going to be stuck together and then they find their way to love.
Right.
But like, yeah, like, I don't know.
I'm trying to think of one of those, the very first Mallory book from Joanna Lindsay.
Oh.
That book.
A long time ago.
I forgot the title of it, but it's that book. I think they had like an insta love sort, like on her end and kind of on his end, but he was like, sorry, I can't be married to you, and like drops her off at his estate and like leaves the country. And she's pregnant because they have this like instant attraction. They end up having like sex and then they get married because she's like, well, we did this. And I think that one's kind of insta love, but he like takes off, so when he comes back she's like real mad, and that's not so love anymore. Like her uncle has to like threaten him to make him come home, and then he's like, wait, you had a baby? And she was like, yeah, I was pregnant when you left here. And it's like a big, so
I feel like I need to read this book.
It's a mess. Yeah, he was like,
you were not
showing, and she's like, not everybody shows. Like not everybody has a huge belly by the time they're 3 months pregnant. Anyway, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's some other ones.
The one that just sort of popped into my head, which is why I kind of said like I feel like it happens more in paranormal maybe, is one of the more recent Nalini Singh Side Changeling books. She actually just did her very first like meeting at first sight, basically. Like
Oh, I love
usually in that
that.
series, the one or both of them will kind of know that like that might be where it's going, but like it's kind of a dance, to get there. And this was the first time that she did where they literally saw each other and it was like bam, like the bond just like went into place and they were both like, oh shit, okay, this is happening. Like they were, and immediately like we're drawn to each other, of course. But that's sort of weird too, because of course, with her characters, some of them are Psy and they like aren't used to feeling. So love is not really a thing that they understand per se to start with.
But that book, that Risking It All from Tessa Bailey that that we read, because that book too, that man looks at a picture
of her, not even her,
and is like, I must protect her with my life. And I'm like, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, you're right. That was pretty, I mean, lust was definitely also involved in that, but I would say that was pretty insular for sure. Yeah.
I thought that was funny.
Oh,
because the way my head is, I was like, wow, like how do
that
I
was
take a
insular for
picture
you.
like
You were
that?
like,
I wouldn't take a picture that makes people want to like sit outside my door and make sure nothing happens to me.
I could see the appeal of that.
Yeah.
What kind of camera did you use?
What was your filter? Yeah.
Definitely not insular for her in that one though. That's
I mean, she was kind of like lust, I think.
Yeah.
He took her out. Grace, he took her out into an alleyway and like had some lady in an apartment sing opera, and I was like, well, now I'm in love with him.
Right. Oh my gosh. So Marielle's question that she always asks everyone.
Yeah, is if we were a fly on the wall, when you were in the middle of your writing process, what would we see?
I guess it depends on like where I am in the writing process. It would not be a pretty sight generally. I feel like I always start off enthusiastically, but the first half of any book is extremely difficult for me to write. I rewrite and I rewrite and I rewrite it. So you would see a lot of like tearing out, like hair tearing. With this book, very early on, I was like, okay, Grace, why? Oh, and also talking to myself. I do this a lot. Like, why, Grace, did you think it would be a great idea to do 2 second-gen characters who each have a separate mystery they're solving while they're like falling in love? Like, who thought this was going to be a great idea? But it's just like, I have these like grand ideas, and then you sit down to actually do it, and you're like, dang, this is like, could you make it any more difficult for yourself? So yeah, there's probably hair tearing, talking to myself, swearing, cuddling with my dog, who's like, Mom, it's all gonna be okay. You will get through this. He is completely like unbothered.
Yeah. And I'm over there asleep.
She's like, this too shall pass. Yeah. It's
do you always write there at your desk, or do you move around?
So I love, this is actually a new desk. I moved recently. So I'm really happy with this. It's like a whole sit stand situation.
Oh.
So that's great. But I like writing, I shouldn't say I need to write ergonomically. I just old body. Frozen shoulder, which is really lovely.
Wow.
Oh yes. It's not great. So I have like my super ergo chair in my desk. So I write. I also like before the pandemic, I would meet up with my friends like every week, and we would write in Starbucks. I still meet up with them, but now it's in my friend's backyard. But usually like where I do my most productive writing, like I like super quiet and like super like Zen environments. I can't even write with music. I was like that as a kid too. Like I couldn't study with music. It just it just kind of got in my way. So I actually like quiet and like stillness to write. But, you know, with a kid, you kind of learn that that's not always possible.
Right.
So I also
Adapt or perish, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I can also like write on the kitchen counter, like 15 minutes, like between, you know, having to drop someone off, you know, pick them up, all that stuff. So necessity, right?
So if you want to, you can tell us about what you're working on now.
So I'm right now writing a short story that'll be a part of an anthology I'm doing with some friends.
Okay.
It's hilarious. It's called Duke in a Box, which
Oh,
you
I
know what
love it.
that's a reference to. Yeah. And the cover literally looks like that. It's a guy with like a Duke with a gift box on his lap.
Amazing. I love it already.
Fabulous. And Darcy Burke gets the credit for coming up with that. I was like, that's wicked genius. And yes,
yeah.
he in an anthology called Duke in the Box. So I am doing a short story for that collection. That's what I'm working on right now. And it's actually Hawker and Mrs. Peabody.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they get their fun little, it's called Mrs. Peabody. You're the first ones to know. It's called Mrs. Peabody and the Unexpected Duke.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah. So it's
okay.
just a short story. It's fun. But
Fun.
I'm also like in the middle of doing a lot of research on the Opium War, which is a little less fun. But actually, I'm reading this great book called Imperial Twilight, which kind of gives a great account of like all the factors that led to the Opium War. And it's just like endlessly fascinating, all the characters and the politics and all of that. To get myself ready to write Glory's book, which is going to be my next main release. And I'm so excited about this book, which again, I'm pretty sure as I start trying it, I'm be like, oh my God, Grace, what made you think? Yeah, so I am crazy excited about the cover of this book, which I'm going to do the reveal in September, but
Okay.
it has the male character is Chinese.
Yeah.
Wei Chen, who's been in the books. And Glory is a quarter Chinese. So yeah, I'm really excited to do an Own Voices book. And I had the cover custom shot. Oh my God. Yeah, I got to cast the actors and everything.
Oh, wow.
so cool.
Yeah, they're beautiful. The cover is beautiful.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm very
awesome.
excited.
Yeah, I can't wait to share it with you guys. I'm going to do the cover reveal in September.
In September.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's keep eyes out for that.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been so much fun. We really love the book, and we hope everyone
Thank you
out there
so
did
much for reading and featuring my book. It's yeah, I'm so glad that you guys are enjoying, and it was so fun chatting with you. So
Yeah, it's great talking with you too.
all right.
Thank you so much. And everyone, if you're seeing this, then today Grace will also be taking over our page. And so you can chat with her there if you have any questions for her.
Okay, fabulous. Thanks for watching,
Thank
everyone.
you so much,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thank you both.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye.